Although most Imperial scholars recognize Hive Fleet Behemoth as the first major Tyranid Hive fleet that invaded the Milky Way galaxy and began the first Tyrannic Wars in the 41st millennium, there is substantial evidence that points to an earlier Tyranid Hive fleet that appeared sometime during the 36th millennium and may have been the first true Hive fleet invasion on Imperial records. I am talking about Hive Fleet Ouroboros, an invading Tyranid force that left a startling and nightmarish scar on humanity's psyche. At that point, the Imperium had no idea of the terrible Xenos creature known as the Tyranids. All records of their attacks describe the Tyranids of Ouroboros as nightmarish, bat-like wing horrors that bore an uncanny resemblance to the creatures of the Imperium's dark past. Void legends told of these monstrous invaders that brought death and destruction in a swift and sudden assault. What made these creatures different than any other Xeno invader was their unrelenting savagery and predatory behavior displayed by most of their attackers. It was mind-boggling that such an aggressive and primal creature was capable of such a massive, coordinated planetary assault. Most of the data collected of Hive Fleet Ouroboros' early invasion come from the ancient historical accounts of Cardinal Maramulus, the Elder, who spoke of a nightmarish legion of winged entities aflame with infernal aura which savaged the Helican sector sometime in the early 36th millennium. The bioforms of Hive Fleet Ouroboros gave off a distinct, soft, lambent glow. The unique phenomena resulted in an unsettling haze of witchlight that surrounded its hosts in battle. Relics hailing from that distant time bear distinct bioplasma scarring, now recognized as consistent with the Tyranid weaponry. The tails of flocks of winged horrors are certainly also consistent with Ouroboros' typical predatory behaviors. Among these relics was a later analyzed Warlord-class Titan, Mechanica Acranus, a veteran of the so-called Ouroboros Wars, which revealed distinct bioplasma scarring and pyroacid burns that matched current Tyranid bioforms. It is also believed that the Space Wolves chapter possesses trophies of that conflict that are very similar to Tyranid lifeforms, such as the artifact the Fenrisians named the Kraken's Egg. The Imperium eventually defeated the Legion of Ouroboros in a 12-day grueling battle at the edge of the Eye of Terror. Some reports claim that some of the fleeing Xenos entered the Eye of Terror, leading many Imperial scholars to make the assumption that the Hive Fleet of Ouroboros originated from the Eye of Terror, and not the Void of Space, like the majority of the Hive Fleets in present day. This victory over the Xenos threat was simply catalogued and archived, and yet thousands of standard years after the death of Cardinal Maramulus, the chain of populated worlds bordering the Thracian sector suddenly ceased communication with the wider Imperium. The Imperial fleet sent to investigate reported back that every scrap of biomass on that planet had disappeared. Myths began spreading on the remaining worlds of the sector, tales of the shadow from the stars that descended to devour the souls of the innocent, and the legends of Maramulus and the glowing primal horrors spread like wildfire. It wasn't long before the entirety of the Hive Fleet was encountered again in the Thracian sector, and the Imperium was finally able to confirm this new threat as Hive Fleet Ouroboros, a name taken from these ancient records. As a response to this newly rediscovered Tyranid menace, the Imperium dispatched a detachment of the Astra Militarum Scadian 14th, known as the Swarm Crushers, due to their storied exploits during the Second Tyrannic War. They were sent to wipe out a tendril of Ouroboros that threatened the desert world of Shukra. Drilled in the most efficient methods of slaying Tyranids, morale was high amongst the Cadians as they engaged the first swarms. Confidence swiftly turned to panic as the Cadians' tactics had little to no impact upon the Xenos. Pinpoint shots that should have ruptured vital organs had almost no effect, while salvos of airburst shells filled with anti-Tyranid chemicals merely provided cover for the swarms. Stunned by their inefficiency in their defense, the Cadians nevertheless sold their lives dearly before they were devoured. From these battles, it was learned that the Tyranid Hive Fleet of Ouroboros favored massed aerial assaults, filling the air with so many gargoyles and harpies that those below had to fight in complete darkness. They struck swiftly, honing in upon areas of strategic value with unerring accuracy. By slaughtering officers and destroying communication outposts, Ouroboros tore the eyes from its prey, leaving them confused and vulnerable. Yet perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Hive Fleet is its strange primordial biology. Encounters with Ouroboros have continued to reveal that the organisms spawned by this Hive Fleet contain crude, primitive versions of common Tyranid bioweapons and organs. Unfortunately, these strange mutations have rendered many weapons and tactics designed to counter the Tyranid menace largely ineffective against the sky swarms of Ouroboros. The Hive Fleet continues to be a problem within the sector, even in the 42nd millennium. The Silver Drakes, a newly found Primaris Space Marine chapter, was tasked with turning back Hive Fleet Ouroboros. Their Inceptor squads cut a swath through the Hive Fleet sky swarms, hunting their immense winged monsters at their heart. Though the Drake's tactics are effective, their numbers are few. Isolated and outnumbered, the chapter digs in for a bloody running war. In another part of the galaxy, a fleet of Sisters of Battle comprising of multiple preceptories of the Bloody Rose stopped in the Thresh system on their way to Ultramar. Their halt was in response to a vision received by Sister Assumpta, who had yet to see combat. The sisters arrayed themselves for war on a lifeless world, and held their position for a day while the canoness of each preceptory prayed for guidance. Their duty was made clear when a tendril of Hive Fleet Ouroboros spewed into the system. The Xenos honed in on the Bloody Rose's position and descended upon the planet in grave waves. Swarms of skittering predators were butchered by the sisters, as squads of sisters were devoured by the ravenous monstrosities. Knowing that the Tyranids feed off biomass, the warriors of the Bloody Rose ensured that every corpse, human and Xenos, was burnt to ash. After 6 months, the influx of Tyranids into the system ceased, and after 6 more months, the last Xeno creature was finally slain. Sister Assumpta was the only member of the sororitas force to survive. Most recently, the Hive Fleet has drawn the attention of a surprising Imperial Adepta, the Inquisition. It is not the Ordo Xenos that is interested in Hive Fleet Ouroboros, however, but rather a minor Ordo, known as Ordo Chronos. This mysterious and incredibly obscure Ordo investigates the potential of time travel through the warp. They have been involved in documenting various instances of deliberate attempts to manipulate the Immaterium to achieve transtemporal travel, not only by humanity, but other intelligent life forms. The Ordo Chronos fears that Hive Fleet Ouroboros is either the remnants of the fleeing Tyranid Hive Fleet that attacked the Helican sector in the early 36th millennium that has now traveled forward through time to the present day, or the Ouroboros Hive Fleet of the 42nd millennium will at some point use the warp to travel back in time to the 36th millennium and continue their assault on the Imperium. To make matters worse, some within the Inquisition fear that the two possibilities are in fact taking place at the same time, meaning that the Hive Fleet exists in the past and present in some sort of infinite loop created by the warp gate that is the Eye of Terror. If this is true, then the highly adaptable Tyranid hive mind might evolve a method of not only understanding the time-warping effects of the Immaterium, but how to manipulate it to evolve the ability to travel through the warp at will. Evidence that this is already occurring might explain the strange flame-like aura that surrounds the bioforms of Hive Fleet Ouroboros. This strange witchlight, as it is described by the Cardinal Maramulis, could be the sign of warp manipulation that is far stronger than the simple shadow of the warp that most Tyranid hive fleets possess. The primal appearance of most of these bioforms might also be the cause of the warp effects of time travel that are mutating the organs and biology of these Tyranids. Few within the Imperium actually believe this theory, partly because admitting to the existence of time-traveling Tyranids would create absolute panic throughout the Imperium of Man, but also because no Tyranid hive fleet or even a Tyranid ship has been recorded as capable of warp travel. Most of these naysayers would much rather believe that Hive Fleet Ouroboros is simply eerily similar to the Hive Fleet that attacked in the 36th millennium. They also point to the fact that the Imperial forces were able to defeat the tendrils of Hive Fleet Ouroboros in the past. Therefore, the outcome of such a time travel venture is already recorded in the Imperium's history books. But as the Tyranid threat continues to grow, we can only hope that this is true. Subscribe to the channel, hit us up with a super thanks if you enjoy our content, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Oh, if you could put my freedom